The YouTube algorithm has changed, and the scriptwriting tactics that worked in the past no longer do. And after posting my first YouTube video over 12 years ago, I basically spent my entire life since that moment trying to become a full-time YouTuber. And after spending the last year writing scripts for some of the biggest YouTubers in the world, I've learned the secret hacks that they use to double their watch time. But I thought to myself, there's no way that these same tactics can work for a small channel too. So I started a new channel myself where I use the exact same tricks, and I couldn't believe it. I blew up with my very first video getting over 45,000 views. And since then, I basically spent the last 4 months testing different script styles to find the most effective one. So today, I'll be sharing the new script writing method that is taking over YouTube, the reason why it works so well, and how you can implement this same script style in your own videos. But first, why are so many YouTubers switching over to this new style? Well, let me explain with a quick analogy. Imagine you have a fish restaurant and you serve the highest quality fish in town, and your competitor across the street serves low quality fish. But you see, this guy has a secret trick up his sleeve. He deep fries his fish with heavy batter to hide the fact that it sucks. And this is similar to creators who rely on flashy editing and epic retention tricks to make their videos seem better than they actually are. The content itself isn't great, but it's hidden behind all of the editing. Now, you might have noticed this trend with AI generated videos where they use epic ADHD style editing to keep you hooked. And while you might be tempted to stoop down to their level and play the exact same game, many of the big YouTubers are realizing that the most important part of the video is the content itself. So the quality of the script is actually more important than the editing. So the key takeaway is to fire your editor and hire a scriptwriter like me. Just kidding, the editing is still important, but going back to the fish analogy, and the content in your script needs to be good, because in this situation, you have high quality fresh fish. And because of that, you don't need to deep fry it or cover it in batter. Instead, you can cook it in a way that brings out the natural flavors. And if you learn how to do that in your scripts, then you don't need to spend hours editing trying to optimize every single second for retention. But what are the common mistakes to avoid when trying to improve your script writing? Well, let me tell you a story that illustrates this perfectly. So a few months ago, I was watching a video about a topic that I wanted to learn about, and the creator was just waffling without any structure. He was taking forever to get to the main point, and so I skipped forward to see if he would actually get to the good stuff. But even after skipping ahead, he was still waffling. So I got frustrated and I clicked off the video. But the lesson here was clear. Your videos need to be structured. You can't just do bullet points and freestyle your videos anymore. There are some rare instances where you might be super charismatic, but for most of us boring people, it's always better to have structure. And in the attention age, every word is crucial. So every line in your video needs a good reason to be there. Because if only one sentence doesn't deliver value, then that could be the reason why your viewer decides to click off your video. But how can you set up your scripts in a way that stops your viewers from just clicking off? Well, let me use a quick analogy to explain this. Have you ever watched a popular TV series that you've been excited about for weeks? But one day you're scrolling through YouTube and you see a video titled Character Name Death Scene.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
And now that you've seen the spoiler, you don't really want to watch the show anymore because the story has been ruined. There's nothing to be curious about anymore, and the excitement is gone. And the same rule applies to your YouTube scripts. But I see many educational YouTubers make the same mistake time and time again. And here's an example of this mistake to make things more clear. Let's say you're making a video about the top 7 best traffic sources to generate leads to your business. Now, what most creators would do is this. Starting with traffic source number 1, we have Facebook ads. And then they start sharing information and context about why Facebook ads are good. But the problem about this approach is that maybe the viewer already knows about Facebook ads, and so they might skip forward to another section of the video, or even worse, they just click off entirely. So by revealing the main lesson too soon, you have the same effect as if you were to spoil the ending of a Netflix show. But how do you get around this? Well, instead of sharing the main lesson first and then giving the context, you want to start with the context and then give the main lesson afterwards. So you're basically just reversing the order of information. But what does context even mean, and how do you actually implement it in your scripts? Well, let me tell you a story which will help explain how. So 3 years ago, I was really pushing myself to make my online business work, and I spent a lot of time reading books to get better, but reading was tough for me. I'd read a few lines, get distracted, and then have to start over. But then I found a book by Russell Brunson called Expert Secrets, and this book was different. I didn't struggle to read it. But it wasn't until years later when I realized why this book was so easy to read. Here's what Russell Brunson did differently. Instead of just explaining concepts, Russell Russell Brunson would start each section with a quick story explaining how he learned that lesson. And this made reading more fun and actually helped me retain the information better. And I know that I'm talking about a book, but books work exactly the same as a YouTube video. You're just consuming content in a different format. But there's another reason why stories are so powerful. Now, earlier I talked about the influx of AI generated videos. Well, if you want to stand out from all the soulless content, then personal stories is how you do that. Anybody can copy your editing style or the retention tricks that you use in your script, but nobody can copy you. And your personal stories is how you make yourself different from your competitors. But there's still one problem, because how do you actually make your stories good? Because think about it. We all know that one person who tries to tell a story, but then they waffle and go into all these unnecessary details, and before you know it, you've already lost interest. So how do we avoid becoming that guy? Well, after analyzing hundreds of stories from some of the most influential creators on YouTube, like Iman Gadzhi and Alex Hormozi, I've noticed that all their stories follow a simple 5-step framework. But before we dive into the 5-step framework, there's so much to cover when it comes to YouTube storytelling that I can't put it all into this one video, otherwise the video would be like 2 hours long. So if you want to learn how you can use storytelling to build a cult-like following like Iman Gadzhi and Alex Hormozi, then check out the first link in the description to learn more about that. But going back to the 5-step storytelling framework and starting with step 1, and you want to set the scene with time, person, and place. This gives your audience context for the story. And let's use the Russell Brunson story that I told earlier as an example. So 3 years ago, I was really pushing myself to make my online business work, and I spent a lot of time reading books to get better. Setting the scene makes the story more relatable to the viewer. And if you're an entrepreneur, then you've probably found yourself in a similar position where you're learning how to make money online, which takes us to step 2, and here you want to introduce a conflict or problem. And think about every movie you've watched. I know for certain that the protagonist probably overcame some sort of challenge, because without struggle, your story will be boring. So going back to the example story, here's what I said. But reading was tough for me. I'd read a few lines, get distracted, and then have to start over, which takes us to step 3, where we describe the attempted solution. This is what you did to try to solve the problem. And going back to our example, I said, but then I found a book by Russell Brunson called Expert Secrets, which takes us to step 4, where you share the result of that attempt. And going back to our example, I said, and this book was different. I didn't struggle to read it, which takes us to step 5, where you end with a lesson for your target audience. This is the key takeaway from your story. And going back to our example again, instead of just explaining concepts, Russell Brunson would start each section with a quick story explaining how he learned that lesson. And this made reading more fun and actually helped me retain the information better. And this is the 5-step framework for telling high retention stories for YouTube. But earlier I mentioned that every single word in your script needs a reason for being there, and this is especially true when writing your hook. And if you break this rule, then your viewers will click off straight away, hurting your watch percentage. So check out this video to learn how to write a banger hook that the YouTube algorithm loves.